Have you ever sat quietly next to your partner, maybe after dinner or before bed, and thought, what would I do if they weren't here tomorrow? It's not a thought we like to entertain, not really. It feels too heavy, too distant, maybe even a little superstitious to say out loud. But if we're being honest with ourselves, it's one of the few things in life we can count on. One of us will go first. And the truth is, the pain of that loss is real. But the regret that can come with it, that can be avoided if we're willing to take a deeper look while we still have time. You've probably seen it. Maybe it happened to a friend, or a neighbor, or maybe your own parent. The surviving spouse left sitting in the quiet, surrounded by the familiar, but everything feeling different. The coffee mug still in the sink, their slippers under the bed. And in the silence, what echoes most isn't always grief. Sometimes it's the words we never said, the moments we let pass, the things we thought could wait. That's what we're talking about today. Not death, but life. Real, everyday life. The choices we still get to make today that could ease the weight of tomorrow. Because when we talk about regret, we're really talking about the chance to love better, live more fully, and leave behind something greater than just memories. We leave behind peace. So let's talk, just you and me, about the things no one really warns you about when it comes to losing a spouse, and the quiet regrets that tend to follow. You'll probably recognize some of these. Maybe they'll make you pause. Maybe they'll make you reach over and hold your partner's hand tonight just a little longer. And if they do, then this conversation will have been worth it. Let's start with the one that seems so small, but leaves such a big hole when it's missing. So many people, after their spouse passes, are haunted not by the fights they had, but by the love they didn't say out loud. It sounds simple, doesn't it? I love you. Thank you. You mean the world to me. We assume they already know. After 30, 40, even 60 years together, of course they know, right? But here's what happens. Life becomes rhythm. You share breakfast, you water the plants, you sit in your favorite chairs after dinner. You talk about the grandkids or what's on TV. You stop saying the little things, not because you don't feel them, but because routine takes over. Then one day, routine breaks. And the silence left behind can be deafening. George, an 81-year-old man I met once, told me something I'll never forget. His wife, Marilyn, passed away just shy of their 55th wedding anniversary. He said, "You know what keeps me up at night? Not the hard times, not the money troubles, or the arguments. It's that I never told her how much it meant when she folded my sweater and left it on my chair every morning, or how every night she warmed my side of the bed before I came in. I noticed it every time. I just never said it." It's those tiny acts, the ones we stop noticing out loud, that often carry the most love. But when we don't speak them, we risk leaving someone we love wondering if we truly saw them. And when they're gone, we're the ones left wondering if we said enough. So let me ask you, when was the last time you really told your partner what they mean to you? Not just a passing love you before heading out the door, but a real, quiet, meaningful moment where you stopped and looked them in the eyes and said, "I see you. I'm grateful for you. I still choose you." And if it's been a while, that's okay. It just means today is the perfect day to begin again. Now let's talk about something a little more uncomfortable, but just as important. Those conversations we avoid because we don't want to bring up the hard stuff. You know the ones I'm talking about. The what-if talks. The end-of-life plans. The legal documents. The passwords. The finances. The funeral wishes. It's not exactly the stuff of candlelit dinners, I'll admit. But avoiding these conversations doesn't make the reality go away. It just leaves the person left behind with 1,000 unanswered questions. And sometimes those questions carry guilt. Margaret, a 78-year-old widow, told me something that broke my heart. Her husband Harold died suddenly. No warning, no time to prepare, and she found herself in a sea of confusion. She didn't know where the insurance paperwork was, didn't know which bills were on autopay or which accounts were still active. She didn't know if he wanted to be cremated or buried, and she second-guessed every decision. "What if I got it wrong?" she said. "What if I didn't do what he would have wanted?" That's the thing about love. It wants to honor. And when we aren't given the tools to do that, we feel like we've failed the person we cared about most. And that's a regret no one should have to carry. But here's the good news. You don't have to wait until it's too late. You can sit down this week, open a bottle of wine, put on some soft music and say, "Let's talk about the hard stuff, because I love you. And I want to make sure we're both at peace, no matter what happens." It doesn't have to be all in one day. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to start. One paper at a time. One conversation at a time. And every step you take now is a step your partner, or you, won't have to take alone later. The truth is, love isn't just soft words and sweet memories. Sometimes love is planning ahead. It's being brave enough to talk about things that scare us, so that fear doesn't become a burden left behind. And when those conversations are done, you don't feel dread. You feel relief, peace, closeness. Like you're in this together, even in the parts no one likes to think about. It might seem like these regrets come from big mistakes or dramatic moments, but more often than not, they grow from the quiet in-betweens. The things we didn't say, the conversations we put off, the gestures we assumed weren't needed. But life, especially after 60, reminds us that nothing is guaranteed. And that's not a threat, it's a gift. Because when you understand the fragility of it all, you realize just how powerful your choices still are. And you still have time. Time to say the words, to ask the questions, to leave no doubt. So maybe tonight, after this video ends, you'll sit a little closer. You'll smile a little longer. You'll reach for their hand and say something that hasn't been said in a while. Because even though we can't control when the final goodbye comes, we can decide what's left unsaid when it does. You know, it's funny how the smallest parts of life, the ones we barely notice, become the most treasured memories once they're gone. And when we look back, we don't always wish for more vacations or fancy dinners. What we really long for are those simple, everyday moments we used to think were nothing special. That's what I want to talk about next. Because one of the biggest regrets people share after their spouse passes away is that they didn't make more memories together. Not grand, cinematic moments, but ordinary ones. Sunday morning pancakes, afternoon walks, sitting quietly with a cup of tea and no need for words. It's easy to slip into routine after being with someone for decades. You do the grocery run, fold the laundry, cook dinner, maybe watch the evening news together, and you think, we'll take that trip later. We'll spend more time together once the kids are settled or once the house is finally in order. The to-do list never ends, but time does. Linda, a 74-year-old woman I met at a community center in Ohio, told me that she and her husband Bill kept saying they'd take a train trip across the country after retirement. It was something they talked about for years. She'd show him pictures of the Rockies, of the California coast, and they'd say, someday. But someday didn't come. Bill passed from a heart attack 1 year before he planned to retire. The house projects were still half done. The trip never happened. And now Linda says, I would trade all those chores we thought were important just to have one weekend away with him. Just one more memory. It's not that we don't care. It's that we think we have more time. But life doesn't give us a warning when it's about to change forever. And here's the thing. It doesn't have to be a big trip. It doesn't even have to be expensive. Making a memory can be as simple as turning off the TV and playing your favorite song from your wedding. Going for a slow drive with no destination. Sitting outside and watching the sunset with your spouse's hand in yours. These are the moments that become the treasures. These are the pictures your kids will find decades from now and smile because they'll see not just a couple, but a love that chose to pause and enjoy one another on purpose. But it takes effort. It takes awareness. It takes saying, let's not wait. Let's make this memory now. Because when you look back later, it won't be the things you bought or the errands you ran that stay with you. It'll be the time you spent simply being with each other, fully present, fully grateful, fully alive in that shared moment. And while we're here together, talking honestly, let's go a little deeper. There's another kind of regret that sneaks up on people, and it often hits hardest when they find themselves alone for the first time in decades. It's the realization that somewhere along the way, they lost touch with who they were apart from their spouse. Now, don't get me wrong, sharing a life with someone is a beautiful, sacred thing. But in the process of becoming we, it's easy to let go of me. And when your partner passes, it's not just them that you lose. It's the shared identity, the routines, the purpose that came from caring for someone else. Walter, an 80-year-old man I spoke with at a veterans hall in Florida, told me how disoriented he felt after his wife, June, passed away. She had been the one who kept the social calendar. She scheduled the family dinners, reminded him to call the grandkids, even picked out birthday cards for their friends. After she was gone, he said he didn't know who to talk to, or even what to do with his days. I didn't just lose her, he said. I lost my compass. That struck me. Because grief is hard enough on its own, but when it's paired with a loss of identity, it becomes even more overwhelming. You don't just miss their presence. You miss the version of yourself that only existed when you were with them. But it doesn't have to be that way. There is such strength in maintaining your own sense of self, your friendships, your hobbies, your voice. It's not selfish. It's healthy. When you make space to nurture your individuality, you don't take away from the relationship. You enrich it. You bring more to the table, more life, more stories, more resilience. Maybe you used to love painting or gardening or going to book clubs, but gave it up when life got too busy. Maybe you haven't gone out with your own friends in a while, or taken a trip without having to check in with someone every hour. That's okay. Life happens. But today is a new chapter. And if you're lucky enough to still have your partner beside you, it's a great time to start reclaiming that part of yourself. Not because you're planning for the worst, but because you're building a stronger, richer life for both of you. Because here's the hard truth. One day, one of you will have to keep going alone. And if that day comes, wouldn't it be a little easier if you still had a strong sense of who you are? If you had friends to call, passions to lean into, routines that still made sense? Walter started going to a men's group after June passed. He even joined a singing club. And you know what he said to me? I wish I'd started this 10 years ago. June would have loved seeing me up there on stage. So, what part of yourself have you been putting on the shelf? What hobby or habit have you told yourself can wait? Maybe today's the day you dust it off. Not because you're preparing for a loss, but because you're investing in your own wholeness and in the long-term strength of your relationship. And now, I want to talk about one of the heaviest regrets of all. The kind that lingers not just in your heart, but in your conscience. It's the regret of unresolved conflict. The argument that never got settled. The grudge you held on to. The apology you never gave, or never got the chance to. When someone passes away suddenly, every moment becomes final. And if your last words to them were harsh, or if you were holding on to resentment you didn't speak about, that silence can echo for years. Patricia, a 77-year-old woman from Oregon, told me that the last conversation she ever had with her husband, Dan, was an argument over a credit card bill. It seemed small at the time. She went to bed upset. He passed in his sleep. And now what she remembers most vividly isn't the love, but that unresolved tension. "I didn't get to say I'm sorry," she whispered to me. And I didn't get to hear it either. We all have moments when we get frustrated. We say things in the heat of it. We pull away, we shut down, we assume there will be time to work it out later. But sometimes, later never comes. So let me ask you, what would it feel like to let go of that grudge today? What would it mean to be the one who reaches out first? Who says, "I was wrong"? Or "Can we talk?" Or even just, "I don't want this to be the thing that lingers between us." Forgiveness isn't just for them, it's for you. It's a gift you give to your own heart. A freedom that clears the air. So if goodbye comes suddenly, you're not carrying the weight of things left unsaid or love left unspoken. And I know, sometimes the wounds go deep. Sometimes we feel justified in our silence. But I want you to imagine something for a moment. Imagine this was your last week together. Would that grudge still matter? Would that argument still be worth holding on to? Because most people say no. They say they wish they had let it go sooner. That the love was always more important than the pride. You still have time. Time to reach across the bed, the kitchen table, the hallway, and say, "I want peace between us. Now, today." You still have time to make love, not regret, the last thing you both remember. It's strange how the heart remembers. Not in perfect order like a photo album, but in scattered flashes. A laugh over burnt toast. The weight of their hand in yours while watching a storm roll in. A quiet apology that came without words. And sometimes, a silence that came when a word was needed most. When someone you've spent your life with is gone, what remains isn't just the big chapters. It's the moments in between. The things you said, and more than anything, the things you didn't. That's why we've been talking so openly about these regrets today. Because while none of us can stop time, we can change how we spend it. Let's take a breath together now. You've heard a lot so far. But before we close, I want to remind you of something simple. Something easy to overlook in all the emotion of loss and love. You still have today. You still have the chance to say the words, take the trip, share the laugh, reach for the peace that maybe felt too far away yesterday. You still have this moment. And this moment is enough to begin again. That's the heart of it, really. Regret only grows when we think we've run out of chances. But you haven't. Not yet. And no matter how long you've been married, 5 years or 50, you still have time to pour a little more love into the life you're building. To make memories with intention. To forgive with softness. To prepare not from fear, but from love. And if you're someone who's already lost your spouse, I want to talk to you directly for a moment. I want you to hear me when I say this. Your love didn't end when they passed. It lives on in the way you speak of them, in the way you care for others, in the way you choose to keep living, even when it hurts. Yes, the regrets may still visit you sometimes. A forgotten thank you, a plan that never happened, a fight that feels too final now. But don't let those regrets define the relationship. Let them teach you. Let them shape the way you love the people still in your life. Because your story isn't over, and you still have love to give. You know, over the years, I've talked with hundreds of older couples. Some have faced unimaginable losses. Others have found ways to grow even closer in their later years. And the one thread I keep seeing in all of them, the happiest, the strongest, the most resilient, is this. They chose not to wait. They didn't wait to say, "I'm proud of you." They didn't wait to share the memory, take the picture, call the friend. They didn't wait to forgive. They didn't wait to prepare. They looked at the time they had left, not with fear, but with purpose. And that made all the difference. So if your partner is still here, I encourage you to do one thing today that your future self will thank you for. Maybe it's writing them a letter. Maybe it's finally bringing up that hard conversation with a gentle tone. Maybe it's canceling your afternoon plans just to sit outside together and do nothing but be. Because here's what I know. Love that's expressed today becomes the comfort you carry tomorrow. And if you're watching this alone, if the person you love most is no longer by your side, then I want you to hear this. You are not alone. Your grief is a sign of deep, beautiful love. A love that shaped you. A love that still lives in you. You have every right to feel the pain, to remember, to cry, to miss. And you also have permission to keep living, to smile, to find new joys. Not in spite of your grief, but because love like that deserves to be honored with a full life. Every single one of us will face loss. But regret is not guaranteed. That's what makes this conversation so important. Because the smallest changes, the ones that seem almost too easy to matter, can be the very things that keep your heart whole in the years to come. So maybe today is the day you start saying, I love you, again. Not out of habit, but from the heart. Maybe today is the day you sit down with your spouse and talk about the future, even if it scares you a little. Maybe today is the day you stop postponing joy. Maybe today is the day you return to something that makes you feel alive. Maybe today is the day you forgive. Because it's never too late to love better. It's never too late to be the kind of spouse who, one day, will be remembered not with regret, but with peace. Before I go, I want to invite you to reflect. What's one thing, just one, you heard today that made you pause? Something that stirred something in your heart or brought a memory to mind? I'd love for you to share it in the comments below, because your voice matters here. And sometimes your words will be exactly what someone else needs to read. If this conversation touched you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel, Strong Elderly Life. We're here to walk with you through the seasons of aging, not just to survive them, but to live them well and to live them wholeheartedly. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, a friend, a sibling, a neighbor, send it their way. You never know whose heart you might help lighten with just one video. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Thank you for being open. Thank you for still choosing love, even when it's hard. And thank you for the life you're building, one choice at a time. Here's to living with fewer regrets and far more love. Here's to memories made today. And here's to you, living your best life at any age. We'll see you in the next video.